evening. This is a meeting of the Harpenden Town Council held on Monday, 26th of June in the Council Chamber, commencing at 7:30. The Town Council record all public meetings held in the Council Chamber. Under new legislation, members of the public are able to record, film and broadcast from a designated area. Please be aware that the meeting may be recorded and might be filmed or broadcast. I now ask the Town Clerk if any apologies have been received.
Yes, Madam Mayor, there's two apologies this evening. Councillor Chichester Miles, who has work commitments, and Councillor Liver, who is away on holiday.
Thank you. And I now ask Council to resolve to accept these apologies. Do you accept them, House? Thank you. We'll now move to declarations of interest. I'd like to ask councillors if any declarations of interest have been made. Councillor Washington.
Yes, I'd like to declare for any items relating to the pavilion that my husband is the treasurer of Harpenden Cricket Club.
And similarly, for any items related to Ruffelsted Park, two of my children and my two sons are current sort of players with Harpenden Colts.
I have one son who is currently with Harpenden Colts.
Thank you. Yes, both councillors brave. Yes.
My son plays cricket and he's actually there physically at the moment.
Oh, right, very good. Thank you.
And my son does too.
Oh,
And,
right.
and my husband, actually.
Excellent. Any more? People? No. Oh, Councillor Heritage.
Not sure that I should declare an interest, but my wife, the other councillor Heritage, was responsible for building the original skate park. She raised the funds to build it.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just to confirm, all councillors are making non-pecuniary declarations as opposed to pecuniary.
Yes, no pecuniary interest. Thank you. Well, it's now the mayor's report and urgent items. So I'll ask the Town Clerk if any urgent items being received.
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Well, I'll just quickly mention to Council the two charity events for this year. We have a quiz night on the 1st of September. I'm going to notify councillors about that. And a carol concert on the 12th of December. So it'd be good to see councillors there if they can make it. We now move to public questions in accordance with Standing Order 20. So have any public questions been received?
There's none received, Madam Mayor, although we do have members of the public this evening who will wish to speak on various items later in the agenda.
Very good. Now, and have any questions been submitted by members of the council?
None received, Madam Mayor.
Sorry,
Oh, what point?
I emailed Councillor Heritage today with a question and copied in Teresa Heritage. So, yes, that has been a question.
Well, we have a process for doing that. It didn't go to Harpenden Town Council.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Are you expecting to speak later?
Well, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, okay.
Just to confirm, Madam Mayor, if you could just confirm what item you're wishing to speak on.
It's regarding a planning permission of a gentleman who's been in receipt of a government grant and we've been waiting with the shops opposite for about a year for a decision on this planning application, which is making our plans impossible to deliver. So that's about that. My name is Lawson Conlon, I'm a business owner in Southdown.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Madam Mayor, in this instance, this the particular function that question relates to doesn't relate to the Town Council directly. So ordinarily, if that question was to have been submitted in advance of the council, it wouldn't have met the threshold in order for it to come in front of council. You could, Madam Mayor, given that the individual was here, permit under this item of public questions to elaborate on the point that he wishes to make, but that would be done on the understanding that it isn't a town council function.
It feeds into grants in general.
Planning is a district council
It feeds into
function.
grants in general, because I understand there was a grant, which I've been emailing the, I'm not sure if it's yourself as town clerk, but the previous town clerk, as to what happened to the £3 million grant could be utilised to invigorate Southdown. And I understand that some of the COVID discretionary funding has been used to do such a thing by funding the street trade in the town centre to open business in Southdown, which is impacting on our boiler balloon business and the use of the scooters on the pavement. Use mounting a flue, asking permission from the neighbours about a metre from the windows, amongst including verbally assaulting me 2 weeks ago in front of my children. So
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think this is quite a long story. It isn't really, it's appropriate to be dealt with, but not at this meeting.
as to why the town council is objected to residential planning permissions, and I know the recent planning permissions for houses, which the town council specifically raised objections to, which would invigorate businesses such as ourselves and probably prolong our lifespan for another 10 to 15 years,
Well,
rather than what looks like it's going to happen. And yet, in the instances that we're seeing, we have to wait a year for, decisions to be made on things like highways, parking,
yeah,
mounting of flues.
I'm sorry,
Who does one approach?
well, on planning, it's a district council matter, and you're in Harpenden House, so you're right to approach Councillor Heritage. So I think that's your best starting point.
Okay, well, as Councillor Heritage knows, there's been a number of emails about this matter because it's been going on for around a year. And I understand. So the gentleman, the street trader concerned, who runs the kebab.
Madam Mayor, I think
Is that a town council matter?
I think the town council and the Madam Mayor has been clear on this matter. It's not an item for council this evening. The proper process for submitting a public question hasn't been followed, nor is the function of which you're asking the question relevant to this meeting. However, I would personally be really happy to meet outside of the meeting to find out more about this, to see whether there is any angle in relation to the town council. I think the town mayor has been very clear.
Thank you very much.
There's
I
not
appreciate
any
both.
further discussion this evening.
And I'll keep my mouth shut and they'll probably disappear. Order sets in.
Thank you. No other questions have been received then, and do we move through minutes before bringing forward the agenda item on the pavilion?
I think, Madam Mayor, it's at your discretion. So potentially, given the public interest here, you may wish to do that earlier.
Yeah, I would suggest that what we do now is move to the agenda item covering the pavilion, which is 8.9. With the page 2 to 8. Well, I understand you have several speakers. So could I ask which is the first?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So we have 3 speakers on this item. We have Roger Butterworth, Jonathan Bullock, also have Ollie Lacey from the Harpenden Dolphins as well. I propose that we take it in that order.
Yes, fine.
So it would be Roger Butterworth first.
You have 3 minutes each for that.
May I just mention my name, Jonathan Bullock, please?
Oh, right. Jonathan Bullock then. You have 3 minutes.
Before the 3-minute clock, good evening, Madam Mayor. Before the 3-minute clock officially starts, I just congratulate all those councillors on their election and also councillors on their re-election. May I also thank the town clerk for promptly and openly making SADC's pre-planning advice available to us. I'll start as well by declaring the interest of Avonbury Lane residents and neighbours in protecting this beautiful, precious and unique semi-rural part of Roxton Park. Please note as well, I am not speaking directly on behalf of these residents, but aim to convey all the views I've heard from them. Our attendance at 3 previous town council meetings reflected our concerns about the size and scale of the initially proposed pavilion to be built on Greenbelt and by the, in our view, highly uncertain business plan to hire out the large communal space, which in itself required such a large pavilion design. We have always supported and believe option 2 offers a more modest like-for-like replacement for sporting purposes only, that balances the competing needs of all park users and does not overwhelm the semi-rural nature of this greenbelt land. We therefore agree with the officer option 2 recommendation. We would, however, like to make a few additional observations on the 3 options for councillors to consider. Under option 1, no rebuild, our seen experience over many years is that the Colts football will not use changing facilities. There has been a recent positive increase in cricket being played, and while a modest pavilion would be a good addition, there has not been a discussion in these council meetings about whether football and cricket teams are expected to pay to use the new pavilion and what these teams' intentions and budgets are. This would be important to clarify to avoid an option 2 white elephant. Under option 2 rebuild, we are assuming this really means a like-for-like replacement, and hence would expect the following. 1, the size should not be materially different in terms of square and cubic metres. 2, there should be no erosion of green belt for parking, car parks, vehicle tracks. 3, the design should be in keeping with and sympathetic to the green belt and semi-rural environment. 4, the design should consider carbon footprint. 5, the design should be secure re-vandalism. And 6, obviously, there should be absolutely no commercial hiring. Under option 3, with hiring space, our view is that the planning pre-advice for this option requires justifications that are now impossible to provide and thus create great financial uncertainty, as well as a likely controversial and lengthy planning process. Hence, we believe this option should be formally ruled out now, irrespective of the red herring of potential external grant funding apparently available only in 2025. Going forward, if councillors are minded to adopt option 2, a small group of Amerby Lane residents would be happy to provide input into the next step scope, design and delivery work if requested, so as to ensure a prompt outcome that all are satisfied with. In conclusion, therefore, we support the officer option 2 recommendation, subject to our like-for-like proposals above. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to Ollie Yakin.
Whether, Roger, you wanted to follow now or?
I think my name is Jonathan Bullock has put that very well. I have nothing to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, should we move to Ollie Lacy? Yes, would Ollie Lacy? Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting the Dolphins here this evening. For those that don't know, Harpenden Dolphins Cricket Club will be celebrating its 80th anniversary next season, the majority of which we spent in our home up at Rothampton Park, which was the first season in 1955. At the time, the club contributed £375, which in today's money is about £10,000, for the build of a new pavilion up at Orchard Avenue, which still is there today, albeit is now closed. Our club is family centric, with a new generation of families being taken to the park on a Saturday afternoon, first as young children and then as new players as their passion for the sport grew. Over the years, it has been a familiar scene to see 2 or even 3 generations of families either playing the game or, as we have a social aspect, enjoying a cricket team all together in the park. Unfortunately, the standard of the cricket pitches deteriorated under the management of John O'Connor, the grounds maintenance company. Our president, Graham Downs, first raised the issues with St Albans District Council and John O'Connor in 2012, yet had little success in encouraging improvements. Despite regular communications and meetings between the 3 parties, promised improvements never materialised. Consequently, the pitches were declared unsafe by the Hertfordshire Cricket League, who asked us to find an alternative venue. Regular cricket at the park that ceased after the 2018 season. Notably, it was the transfer of responsibility of Rothampton Park from the St Albans District Council to Harpenden Town Council that brought about a welcome change of focus, energy and determination. Since then, many positive steps have been taken, not least the decision to invite Harpenden Cricket Club to prepare and maintain the cricket pitches from John O'Connor, which in the last 2 years has seen a significant improvement in the way that the pitch is cared for, treated and prepared. With a well-maintained and managed pitch, my club set train plans to return home to play league cricket up in Harpenden. Alas, the Amenbury Lane Pavilion was closed last autumn. So whilst we now have a pitch fit for league cricket, we have no pavilion, and without changing facilities, shelter and a place to prepare cricket tees, we cannot bring my team back to its traditional home of Rockhampton Park. The jewel in the crown and the final step that will allow our cricket club to return is the build of a new pavilion. The park is a wonderful venue, and a family-centric cricket has been a staple of the English summer many, many years. To play cricket there again on a well-maintained pitch alongside a modern functional pavilion is the goal that now feels within reach. So on behalf of the president of Harpenden Dolphins Cricket Club, all its playing members and the families that enjoy the social aspects of the gathering on a Saturday afternoon, I ask for your support for the new pavilion project, please, such that we might be able to play again there very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Then pass to you, Tom Clark, to introduce the opposition.
Yes, of course, Madam Mayor. So not too much for me to say, Madam Mayor, other than just a couple of introductory comments. First of all, this project's been scoped for a short while now, and our focus to date has been on developing a viable pavilion to be able to take forward to improve the park. Most recently, we carried out some pre-planning application, which was a very useful exercise for us in testing some of the key principles that were scoping and leading the project up to that point, and also testing some of our different ideas and the ways in which the council could go forward at that particular time. I think it's fair to say the advice we've received has been very, very useful. It's reinforced some of the things that we thought would be the case. It's also raised some other kind of challenges and thought processes with us. It's also fair to say, I think as officers, we don't necessarily agree with everything that's within that advice. I think there are areas that we could as a council challenge and justify some elements where the advice gives some doubt. As we see it as officers, we've got three broad options which are set out in the report under item 3.6 this evening. And you'll note that there are a series of recommendations under 3.7 as to the next step. One point I would make, Madam Mayor, is just in response partly to the residents' public question, but also just to reiterate something that has been mentioned many a time at council previously on this subject, and that is the intention in terms of the changing facilities has always been to replace the facilities like for like. However, the challenge that the council has always had is at the point at which those pavilions were originally built, the national governing body requirements were of much smaller changing rooms. Because we're now rebuilding them, we have to build them to the minimum standards that are required by the ECB or by the FA, depending on what they are fit for. So whilst the intention has always been to replace the facilities like for like, the size of them will increase. Now, under option 2 and the recommendation to carry out some further scoping and bring that back later in the year, at that point, we'll be able to understand exactly what that knock-on impact would be as to the overall footprint of the building. But it should be just very clear that the minimum standards have changed and you won't secure any planning permission unless the minimum standards are met. Sport England is a statutory consultee on these matters. Welcome any questions, Madam Mayor. That's the end of it.
Yeah. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Fisher.
Can I ask you, Graham, do you train girls as well as boys?
Sorry, Graham's not here this evening.
Oh, sorry.
In his place. So no, we are a single team. We classify ourselves as open age mix, but at the moment we only have male adult cricketers in our team.
Are you aware in Harpenden of female cricket teams?
Yes. So we're very good friends with Harpenden Cricket Club. So we're aware that they have Harpenden's sides, women's sides that will play on a Sunday.
Would it be right in saying that any changing, and when we're saying changing, I mean, we're obviously including toilets in this, aren't we? I'm hoping desperately. We have to include changing toilet facilities for both male and female and possibly disabled and even a neutral toilet. So that is something that we have to consider, isn't it?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and that's perhaps where the minimum standards across Sport England, the ECB and the FA have changed drastically over recent years.
Yeah.
And just to pick up on just a key point that you made, Councillor Fisher, and that is that a key part of the agreement with Harpenden Cricket Club as part of the maintenance is to run girls cricket, and that's been one of the key principles of that licence from right at the start.
Any other questions to officers, councillors? Councillor Scott.
Yes, actually, I have another question for you. Could you just remind me how many members in your club currently, please?
So we have, in terms of current playing members, we have about 20.
Yeah.
We're a single team, as I say, family club, but we have a lot of ex-members who have naturally been part of the club. Maybe they're at an age now where they can no longer play cricket, but they still have an active interest and would like to see the Dolphins return to Rotherham because their memories of playing for the club are all up in the park.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I've just one question regarding design and specification of option 2. Maybe I missed something, and so I apologise. It wasn't clear to me whether the space within option 2, which I think has 114 square metres of clubroom space, as opposed to 140 square metres for option 3. It wasn't clear to me in the notes whether that space within or whether option 2 would be hireable, even at a reduced square meterage.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So it's in order to answer that question, I think one of the challenges that we've got with this particular project and the item this evening, you've got a lot of back information. So the two options that Councillor Scott's referring to relate to an earlier council meeting when there were 2 different options as to what size the hireable space would be. Option 2 that's put in front of you this evening has no hireable space at all, doesn't have a club room. It would have a very modest kitchen and lobby area. There will be no hireable space at all. So the option 2 that was 114 square metres was an earlier discussion at council. If council were to go forward on option 3 is deliberately worded so that it would include a hireable space up to 140 square metres, which is the size that was originally looked at from a kind of commercial point of view. So option 2 this morning, Madam Mayor, this evening, to be clear, has no hireable community space within it.
Is there any space for tea?
Would there be space for cricket? Well, there would be a kitchen, wouldn't there?
Quite important point. The ECB would expect you to have an area to eat that isn't the change room and isn't the kitchen. So there has to be some sort of space in there. Am I right?
I don't know the regulations for the ECB directly.
Yeah.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So there are minimum requirements.
There is a space.
So that would be met. So it'd be a kitchen and a very small lobby area. Because in order for the overall footprint under option 2 to be kept to a minimum, it would only be a very small lobby area that could come in, serving hatch, perhaps sit around in there, but it wouldn't be a big space at all. If you were to look to have a big space in the middle, then you would be looking at planning implications as a fine balance, because we would have to justify the size of that. But it would be under the basis of the minimal requirements under the ECB mainly. There aren't any FA requirements as to in relation to that sort of space.
Could I follow up on the comment from Councillor Burrows, please? So cricket is our national game. It rains in this country from time to time, although it has rained for a while. Presumably, I'm not a cricketer, but presumably at some point the players and some of the spectators may need to retire from the rain to take shelter during a rain shower and then return to the pitch when it stops raining. So would that be possible? Would there be a sort of a comfortable area or space for the players at least to retire to if it's raining during the game under option 2?
So, Madam Mayor, I think the best way of answering that is it would be a very modest space. The sort of thing you're describing is more option 3, a social space in the middle. We've described this as a hireable space, but essentially what's been described is more towards option 3 than what option 2 would be.
Yeah. And so that therefore follows, after the first innings, after the first team has played, the sides would break for tea. That would not be possible in a comfortable venue or position inside option 2. As you say, very modest space, and they'd probably have to remain outside to take their tea between the 2 innings of the game under option.
I think that's realistic, Madam Mayor. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Question. Don't know that much about cricket, but are the games unisex?
Yes. So the Hertfordshire Cricket League is very open. It's all inclusive, so there are both male and female cricketers.
So you have male and females on the pitch at the one time?
Not within our clubs currently. We are open to it, but we have played against opposition that had both male and female cricketers on the same pitch at the same time.
Can I just add, Hertfordshire Cricket Club do have in their selection policy, girls play with the men if they're good enough. So it's mixed cricket, mixed adult cricket. So you can have some very good sort of like cricketers who are playing in the team. So that's obviously another consideration in terms of facilities, should they be allocated a pitch at Rockhampton.
Councillor Brosnan.
Yeah, I believe the preference before was to put the new pavilion on lower down the slope from the existing Ainbury pavilion. But some of the pre-planning applications were saying that they preferred it to be over the existing footprint. Was that something that we're going to, is that one of the things that you approve of or are sort of questioning where it would go?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So that is one of the areas where we would have a slight disagreement. There are significant benefits operationally for it to be further down in what was kind of option B location. It has the potential to have greater connection with the artificial grass pitch facility. From a visual point of view, it is tucked away more, we believe. Ultimately, we don't necessarily, Madam Mayor, agree with the idea that by keeping it closer to the residential properties, that it means that they have the opportunity to keep an eye over it. I'm not sure, and perhaps residents may have a different view. I'm not sure whether that is something, a responsibility that residents may wish to have. So there are small things that we would not be in agreement with, and that is one of them. We do think the location should be further down along the hedgerow, and that's the basis for which we would scope the.
I thought also the roof was going to be a lot higher than the existing one because it's going to be a crown. Is that still going to be the case? Because why you wanted to go down further was so the roof wouldn't be such an imposing feature in England.
Yes, Madam Mayor, that was one of the rationale for having it further down the hedge line, because it is less prominent. However, it's worth saying that if we were to be scoping further option 2 on a smaller overall footprint, that will impact on the roof lines and the whole size and scale of the building anyway, because much of the roof size shape is dependent on what's required under building regulations in order to facilitate whatever the footprint is. So there are lots of those sort of details that we wouldn't have the answer to now, because we need to go and follow that up depending on what briefing.
So it's a redesign.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, potentially, yeah, we basically take the design as it is at the moment, make it smaller, and then look at the implications as to what that looks like from a visual point of view, but also a roof line and other things.
Thank you.
Just wondered if you had any views on what the different timelines were, because obviously both of these buildings are pretty eyesore and horrible sat up there at the moment. And is there a difference between option 3, option 2? Well, option 1 obviously is stuff very descriptive in its own right, it's been quite quick. But between option 2 and option 3 is what would be required through the planning process, and therefore when one of those two might come to fruition.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so it's a very good question. So I think from the point at which we would submit a planning application, there wouldn't be one option wouldn't be longer than the other, because I think it would be scrutinised in the same way depending on which one it is. We would still have to make justifications for developing Greenbelt. So from the point of submission, I don't think it would be the planning would be any longer. What there may be some more lead-in time that we need for option 3 to build the justification for the case to meet the Greenbelt requirements. So that's probably the best way, more lead-in time, I would say. However, we normally put these things in pretty quick. But in terms of the planning process, I don't think it would be a difference.
Councillor Scott.
I have a question for Mr. Bullock, if I may. So just on behalf of and thank you for your statement earlier, which was very helpful. Can you just help us, the councillors, understand a bit more detail about the concerns of the residents on Almondbury Lane regarding the development? Is it noise, traffic? What are the, from a practical perspective, what's really concerning you and your neighbours?
I think, Madam Mayor, there's a range of concerns. I'm obviously starting out, I think, with the business rationale for a hiring space, which was the raison d'etre for option 3. So our seen experience is that we don't believe that hiring space is commercially sensible, and it opens up all kinds of issues with regard to access. If anybody's going to commercially hire some space, they're going to want to get to it, and the pavilion, wherever it's located, is going to be on a greenfield, which then there'll be a discussion about access, tracks, roads, parking, disabled parking, and then it becomes a big project, and also it's crowding out the private sector. There's plenty of places where you can hire space in Harpenden without the council trying to make money out of it as well. So that's one concern. The second concern is generally on green belts, and that's echoed by the pre-planning advice, which I think was fairly clear. It is a semi-rural part of Rockelston Park. It is different from where the sports centre area is, and I think residents are keen that is protected for all users of the park. And obviously, the focus has been on cricket, which we love to see. But there are many other people who don't want to see sport the whole time and like walking, dog walking, reading, picnicking, just having some quiet time up in that part of the park. And I think anything became too overwhelming and too overbearing in that part of Rockelston Park would take away that unique environment. I think the main concerns.
Can I ask a question? Roughly, how many spaces are there for parking cars there?
None, because it is greenbelt. And we have an ongoing discussion about parking for sports people, which shouldn't happen, but does happen. But clearly our view is it's greenbelt, and if you start eroding it with car parking and disabled parking, which I don't understand why that would be required, but it's greenbelt.
There is cars parked up there.
They shouldn't, but they do. It's a matter that the town clerk's aware of, and we're in discussion with him about.
It's a car park.
There's also,
That's Orchard Avenue.
there's Orchard Avenue. That's where the other derelict monstrosity is.
That's at the end of Orchard Avenue. It's got a bit of parking, not a lot.
Yeah, that is
It's
a
very
not
small,
a
very-
car park.
very
It's quite
space,
small,
very
but if the other pavilion went down,
Yeah.
potentially they could.
Councillor Fisher, did you have a question?
No, I was just trying to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think I
Thank
knew
you.
where you were thinking of.
Yeah.
Well, we,
Mind if I say a quick word?
Someone's considering a discussion.
well, if,
It'll be a quick one. We're lucky enough to be like Inverleigh for a long, long while, and we can, at the back of our garden, we can see kids enjoying the park. But to use it as a changing room, these are your two options. You can park in the main car park, swimming pool, and walk up and change. There is a track up there, but it's very muddy in the winter, it's full of puddles. Or you park in Orchard Avenue and you walk down. So are your children going to get out of the car in their sleeping outfit, walk right across the park in the winter, covered in mud, change, get covered in mud, change again and walk back to the car? What they're going to do is what they do now. They park, the kids come dressed to play, they play their game, they walk back to the car, they've got the football boots on, they change in the back of the car. If they're playing cricket, most of the people that aren't too worried about, I take your point on about where they're going to, if it rains such and such, but I've asked the question, how is the changing room going to be used? Because at the moment, it hasn't been one there for the top for 8 years. I will now.
Thank you. I think the problem is that we have requirements that modern day standards have changed, and that's what's changed.
How do you access it?
I feel we've had quite a discussion. Oh, Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's only one observation. I think with changing facilities, you've got to
not just look at the here and now, but you've got to look ahead to future-proof, because regulations are changing, they change very quickly these days. What we don't want is to find ourselves with a facility that is useless. I think we've got to observe common sense and look for changing facilities, because whilst there aren't perhaps many female football teams at the moment charging around, there might well be in a few years' time, and they could well require changing facilities. So I think that has to be a given.
We have a recommended way forward on page 230. And I'm trying to suggest that we vote the recommended way forward. Could I ask for a show of hands if we have agreement on that?
So one more clarification question. We're just choosing between options 1, 2, 3 at this stage, not between the further option A and B.
Well, as you see, it says rule out option 1. And then
option A and B regarding the siting of pavilions. I think it's implied from the documents that we're deferring that decision regarding site A and site B to a further decision. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can we perhaps, on the basis of what Carl said earlier, that remove the word hireable and community of hireable space from option 3? Because I think it does cause unnecessary confusion, because at the moment, as has been said, we're not sure about the business rationale or necessity necessarily of hireable space, but we have had clear justification this evening for a larger community space, whether it's hired out or not, or whether it's just used practically.
But sorry to interrupt, it would be hired by the cricket club, for example, when they hire the pitch and the pavilion. So it's horrible in that sense.
But is it hired out to third parties, for example? Because I could line off 10 halls around Harpenden that are much more accessible and are already there and usable.
Yes.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, it's probably just worth adding a slightly bit of context in terms of the hireable space. So this idea first came about probably a couple of business plans ago of the town council when it was looking at maximising commercial opportunities. We have Park Hall community facility where it's fair to say we could hire 2 to 3 times over. And so the original plan of this was to take the opportunity for the council to create something that's required for the sports pitches and also supplement that with ancillary facilities that could be hireable. So that's where it originally came from. In more recent times, off the back of COVID, the cost of living crisis, the officer reports have questioned some of the business case opportunity for that. So whilst that was there a couple of years ago, and it may well be there in a couple of years' time, as of right now, Madam Mayor, we're not 100% clear that we could recommend to council that we would have the volume of community groups hiring space that we would have had a while back. That's why the previous council has continued scoping this, but it's actually kind of continued to review the financial side of the project itself. So that's just a bit of context to that hireable space.
It's also the work for people to park in the hireable space and a cricket match.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, if I may, so just to be absolutely clear, there's never been any intention to create additional parking at this site. That we've been clear on that every time we've spoken about it. In every report, there is no intention to increase any parking on this. In fact, the only time that we've mentioned additional parking is in the report that you've got this evening, which relates to the Orchard Avenue Pavilion site. Should you wish to demolish that and move ahead, there is the option to actually create capacity in that particular area, which one of the benefits could be you would be removing parking elsewhere off streets. The idea at the weekends, in particular, Madam Mayor, with the sports facilities, the grass pitches, they're already at capacity in terms of their use. So we're not proposing any additional people at weekend. So from a car parking point of view, the Orchard Avenue element of this would actually add capacity and could help with issues elsewhere. But the Ainruby Lane site, there has never been any intention of offering any public parking whatsoever.
Thank you.
Can I suggest from what I'm hearing, what this is really about is option 2, the question around just making sure the definition of option 2 is correct, be it size, meets all the requirements, etc. So it's not really that there's, I think, around the table an option 3 as such, but there is a lack of definition, understandably, because it's a process to go through around what option 2 is. That might simplify it, or certainly simplifies it in my mind.
Yes, and it says, in the recommended way forward, further scope option 2 and bring detailed proposals to council in September and November. So
Absolutely.
if we're voting for further scoping, councillor Scott.
Possibly to build on Councillor Ray's point here, I'm just again, not being a cricketer, but just, wanting to offer guests, visitors to Harpenden who are coming from different parts of the country to play cricket here, an appropriate level of hospitality. I think it's only fair and decent that the plan, that the design for option 2 has a reasonable sort of internal space, horrible or not, to accommodate a visiting cricket team if it's raining or between the innings. I think that's quite reasonable. And I would propose a minor amendment in the second bullet point on 3.7, just to consider options for suitable, not sure what the right wording is, to sort of lounge hospitality space for visiting sports teams.
It's really difficult one. I don't know how many of the people in this room have tried to get a sports team together on Saturday. It's the first year I've not done it in 5 years. It's painful trying to get 11 together. And the best way to do that is to have the right facilities. And if you've got Harpenden doing the wicket, you've got Cricket Club doing the wicket, you're halfway there. But the first thing people think about is, what's going to be like? Am I going to be playing with my mates? And what the facilities are. And that, to me, is you've got to have that space right. But I think to just, the theory that we've always done it and kids will go backwards and forwards in their muddy kit and jump in the car, that's fine. But when you're dragging a bag full of cricket gear up there, it's not as straightforward as that. I think cricket is like farmers. We all think we're a bit special compared to all the other sports, but it needs to be right. Otherwise, it won't be used, and then we really will regret it. It will be right. Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and Clark, are we at the point that do we need to alter the wording, do you think, or do we take a vote on the recommended way forward? And I think is it sufficiently vague at the moment?
So, Madam Mayor, my only observation would be in that if you accept this way forward and recommendations, what you will see for option 2 at the next meeting is you will see an overall footprint of the building updated. You will also then see what that means in relation to what we described as the small lobby area. So at that point in September or November, probably September in this case, you will then be able to look at that small lobby area and say, we don't think that's a suitable size, or we do think it's a suitable size. The only danger in being specific in some of the language now as to what officers are asked to go away and scope could mean that some of this wording is deliberately in line with planning advice. And a planning application, for example, that has a hospitality area is treated very different to an application that has a lobby in order to support sport that's being played. So I'd just be cautious about the language. That would be my own. But I think we've heard certainly understand the sentiment, and we're very clear as to what we would be bringing back to the next meeting.
Thank you. Well, on that basis, could I have a show of hands on pursuing the recommended way forward? Thank you. Any votes against? Or abstentions? One abstention. 2 abstentions. Councillor Fisher and Councillor Jane Ray. No votes against. Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. That concludes our item on the pavilion. So thank you for coming to listen to that item. You're welcome to leave. And I suggest we next move to the skate park. We have people here wishing to speak about the skate park. Right, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move to the skate park project. And so I would like to I'll ask the town clerk to start, please, and then move to.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just a couple of words of introduction to me from me. The report you've got in front of you is backed up this evening because we've reached a kind of key milestone in terms of the next steps for this project. The report tries to provide a lot of background context to this particular project, which has been going on a short while now. So I'm going to pass to Sarah in a moment, who's going to elaborate on some of the key points within it. There were just 2 points that I wanted to make councillors aware of, Madam Mayor, related to noise and to funding. So in terms of noise, I know there have been various conversations in terms of noise impact and suggested actions that may be taken. I just wanted to flag to council that we always take noise impact very seriously on all our projects, and indeed in particular around those projects that require planning permissions, because noise surveys and noise assessments have to be undertaken. You'll know that I circulated to councillors a noise assessment that was undertaken recently, which set out essentially that there would be a positive impact on improving and changing the skate park from what is a metal skate park at the moment to a concrete one. In terms of the funding, the project budget for this project has always been £250,000. The Town Council, Madam Mayor, has set aside £100,000 of its capital reserve. And we're working in partnership, as we have done in the past with Park, to fundraise the remaining amount, which is no mean feat, really. It's a really tough target for them to hit. On that note, I know Lisa is going to say some words after Sarah has done her introduction, Madam Mayor, but I just wanted to make just those very high level points about noise. I'd like to pass to Sarah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, good evening, firstly, and thank you for reviewing the reports and the copious amount of appendices in there. Apologies, I've definitely helped with the 14-page agenda at this council meeting. So, just to try and give a bit of an overview on the project. So at the extraordinary council meeting at March of this year, council approved the designs that were set out in Appendix E. Following the completion of the technical surveys out on the site in preparation of building planning submission documentation, the design has been amended, and that is for several reasons. To avoid clashing with various services that we discovered running from the leisure centre, and also to reorientate the facility better within the park's topography itself and to sit it better within the site. Whilst, of course, not jeopardising the features that make up the facility or deviating away from the original vision documentation as set out by ourselves and Park at the very beginning of the partnership. So this revised design, this is for the council's consideration this evening, can be found in Appendix A. So Appendix A is the diagram that you need to have in front of you, please. So the proposed facility, which is just over 500 metres, significantly increases accessibility. It ensures that all features can be enjoyed by not only well-practiced skateboarders, but also younger children, either starting out on their own skateboards, or as you'll see now, over in the skate park, whizzing their teddies around in remote control cars, and the teddies looking very petrified as they zoom off the ramps. It's not just skateboarders that use that facility, they just stretch right across the demographic and the family. Beaton Park, who are our designers for this project, have ensured that the design not only sits well within the existing topography, but is empathetic in its colour palette, of choosing soft greys and yellows, whilst also remaining open, ensuring that the pleasant view of the wider parkland isn't obscured. Everyone's still got a nice view of the trees and the surrounding area, the daffodils in spring that line the tree-lined avenue, etc. Increasing the line of sight hopefully will not only deter any undesirable behaviour, but also actively encourage people to try a new activity by watching other people from the distance and then gradually stepping in there. It's a bit like stepping onto a dance floor at a wedding. Sometimes you need to see other people doing it before you have the confidence to get in there yourself. If the skate park remains a priority project, the required documentation would be submitted by ourselves to the planning authority by mid-July, with the aspiration of the permission being awarded by October this year. So obtaining that permission is absolutely crucial in allowing parks to access the larger grant funding pots from companies such as Veolia, and their closing deadline for the funding this year is November. So it's an achievable but tight target. On that note, I'll pause now for any comments or questions that you might have. Happy to answer.
Any questions? That's all right.
Can I ask how, well, firstly, I think it's fantastic that they're raising £150,000, which I think is noticeably different from the pavilion we're doing for other sports, which, as I can see it, the council is paying for it completely. So I think that's a great positive for me. I guess what I'm interested in how that fundraising is coming along to that deadline, and do we think people are going to manage to hit that, and therefore we're going to have a funding project?
So you will receive an update from Park shortly, as well as the representatives are here ready and waiting. There are several different streams of the fundraising in this project. One of the main ones is the donor bricks. So if any of you were at the Summer Carnival, I'm sure you will have had a flyer past you about sponsoring a donor brick, which leads the accessible pathway into the park. There are several other methods which were proven during the play area, projects, such as the donor board and sponsorships from local companies as well, in addition to the larger grant funds. But I'm sure that Lisa will be able to add further details to that shortly.
Thank you. Do you have questions, Councillor Scott?
Yeah, I have two questions, please, and I agree. I think it's an excellent plan, as my support. But just to understand the proposal, firstly, understand the footprints increasing by approximately just less than 50%. Do you anticipate any planning approval challenges with that increased footprint?
So the footprint is actually decreasing compared with the existing skate park. From Para 3.8, the proposed footprint is 522 square metres compared with the existing park, which is 750.
I apologise. Second question is that I've received a couple of questions from local residents, particularly on the Leighton Road power block, regarding potentially building a soundproofing wall. And I'm not an expert in the technology or anything, but I guess the principle is there'll be essentially a timber hybrid wall essentially between the skate park site and the Leighton Road site, to deflect or dampen the noise. Is that something that you considered?
Yeah, so happy to pick that up, Madam Mayor. So there's these three observations that I would make on that. And we haven't considered a sound wall in the scoping of this up until this point for a number of reasons. Firstly, the noise assessment that we carried out, we believe showcases that actually there isn't a noise issue as a result of this project. Secondly, the cost implications of producing a sound wall would be fairly incredible. We understand the one that you've been that's been shared with you previously, upwards of £200,000, the equivalent of. So to produce something like that would be incredibly costly. And going back to that original point, there is a serious question mark as to whether it is required or not. The third point is that we try to design out any risks of antisocial behaviour on projects like this in parks. And producing any kind of wall or hidden space in that area would actually go against some of those principles. So for those three reasons, we would have some concerns as officers around any sound wall features.
Yes.
So may I start that? Yes, please, Madam Mayor. Just to note that within the acoustic report that was received, Councillor Scott, the A comparable was taken of an existing skate park in Bristol, which is a concrete-based skate park, which has very similar features to the proposed. And with that, it was found that the sound levels are actually 10 decibels quieter than the existing skate park near the Metal Ramp skate park, just to give you a comparative.
Okay, thank you.
So there's going to be a substantial improvement. Councillor Fisher. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just made that point around 10 decibels. Obviously, decibels is quite unfortunate for being an engineer. It's a logarithmic scale, so that is actually a massive difference. It's not a small difference. 10 decibels that's not 10%. It's.
Can you illustrate that? Because not by shouting, but can you give us an example? Like an aeroplane. Well, I've got emails from various residents.
So to give you an idea, 50 decibels is, or 40 decibels is breathing, quiet breathing, and 90 decibels is an aircraft taking off.
Okay, so it's quiet.
So a difference of 10 decibels.
Yeah, it's
at the top end of that is significant.
Yeah.
I'm sure my maths teacher would not be happy with that as a definition.
But I think putting it into real life items is important.
It's a very significant improvement, I would say, compared to what's there existing.
Thank you.
I understood it from one of the issues in the report about the wall. I'll come back to the misguided points in a moment, but one of the issues was that any sound that there was much reduced because of the concrete would actually reverberate back into the park anyway and make it less pleasant for people who are actually using the park. So you were limiting one problem and creating another, which seemed to be an odd use of £200,000. As I read the report, just seemed, an impractical solution. On a general point, I don't know how many emails the council has received. I've seen one, and it seems that as a council, we do obviously have to listen to constituents, but we do have to, I think, balance what we think are reasonable requests to explore and what we're actually spending public money on. And I don't know whether we paid for the advice of the engineer or the chap from Boton who did the planning. It does seem to me that we need to rein in a little bit what we explore as being a realistic option, and a sound wall at £200,000 clearly isn't. And I don't know whether we as a group might feel that money could be spent elsewhere. People will have views, obviously, that are extreme, and sometimes we can just say, probably won't build a wall if that's the right with you without actually spending money on it.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, just 2 points on that, just to confirm and reassure that all of the surveys we've undertaken so far are all surveys that are necessary in order to inform a planning application. And secondly, just to be clear that unless council was to resolve to ask us to do it this evening, there are no plans to further scoping sound office.
Councillor Red.
Is this sunk into the ground? This is something that's quite flush to the ground?
In areas, yes, in other areas, no. To answer that question.
I'm just questioning that because it's good for health and safety, and of course I'm thinking at night time, the lights are not always on. Chances somebody might fall in there.
There's a pond on the other side of the road.
Well, there's a man found in the pond down the sidewalk there.
There is thank you, sorry, Madam Mayor. There is a diagram within the report that shows cross sections of the various levels. The levels in there are no greater than the existing skate park. There is lighting at low level from the leisure centre along that area, and passable lighting from the car park area as well. I think it would be highly. I was questioning why people might walk into a park when it's unlit at that time of day. It's not illegal. Quite right, it's not illegal. I think it's highly unlikely that somebody.
Someone lights at a point across the roads at night time. It's not possible.
Don't walk that way home.
I have to walk home, but I just.
I think there probably is a distinction between the ponds and the safety features we have to put there and some other play equipment. I mean, I completely understand the point. I think however, if we were to carry out the ROSPA play inspection on a skate park of this design, they wouldn't recommend any particular safety features around fencing or anything like that. So it's a fairly common approach to have a bowl sort of system within a skate park.
Thank you.
Just looking at the cross section that you've got here, I don't think it's very steep. I think it's like no worse than going up and down a hill. Looking at this cross section.
And also to note the landscaping funds leading into it. So you wouldn't just sort of disappear into a dip. You are going up a landscaped grassed area before you then reach the outer rim of the concrete skate park to then get into the vault. So there is but you would notice, you've definitely noticed a surface change.
Thank you. Any more?
I've just got one. When I read through the comments at the end, there was a lot of feedback from the skaters themselves that seemed quite excited about it, but they wanted very specific things.
Yes.
Were those incorporated in the final design? My eyesight can't see.
Yes, they were. Apologies, it is tiny. No, yes. Yes, they were. So the most popular ideas were put in there, and also additional features which added extra to the current favourites of the metal skate park were also included, making sure that it accommodates not only for skateboarders but also, as mentioned earlier, children on scooters, obviously wheelchair users as well, and trying to widen the cross section of community that can use that facility rather than just being skateboarders.
Thank you. So I think we can move to invite Mrs. Griffin to update us on the fundraising.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for your time this evening. So I'm Lisa Scriven. I'm the current co-chair of PARC, the charity behind the fundraising effort. My colleague Andy Higston is here, who's a fellow trustee. And I must just mention that my co-chair, Rod Cooley, sends his apologies. He would have loved to have been here this evening, but is abroad. So just to give a little bit of background on the charity, we were established in 2018, just seven local residents, parents, grandparents, who wanted to redevelop Rothamsted Play Area. Same budget on that project, it was a £250,000 project. The council once again did give us some support on that project with the funding. The remainder of the funds were raised by the 7 members of the charity. We, as Sarah has covered, thank you for your report, Sarah, very, very thorough, and you have covered a lot of the things that I wanted to say tonight. But in terms of our current position on fundraising, we currently have a balance of £9,000 in our account. So pre-fundraising, we were working closely with the council, and it was very much about public consultation. So initially to try and establish what project residents wanted to see us deliver on. Following on from that, it was to try and discern what features they wanted the skate park to contain, and thereafter actually really kind of narrowing down the design to come up with the drawings that you see before you today, so this final design. And we hope to sort of have captured as many of the requests of people who did respond to the consultation over the many months that it's taken place. So in terms of going back to fundraising, as I say, we stand with about £9,000 in our account. Our biggest fundraising initiative on the play area was the engraved pavers. So we raised just short of £30,000 on the play area. We would hope to raise similar with this project. We have sort of done a soft start on selling the brick pavers. And we will be ramping that up, kind of going through social media, Harpenden Network, etc. in the coming weeks. Over and above that, we have a donor board as well, which again, there is an existing one in the play area. We'll be doing a similar thing, and that just gives an opportunity to either individuals or businesses alike to have their name and or logo on the donor board, which will be present at the sort of entrance or main access to the skate park. So we obviously ask for a donor fee for that. The Harpenden Trust has already pledged their support. They did gave us £30,000 to the play area. They have done the same for this project. Final amount is to be agreed. In their words, it was that they didn't want to commit to amount and leave us
short of a few £1,000s. So we do have their committed support for the project as well. We are very aware that it is no small feat and we have a significant challenge ahead of us, and we are going to be relying on both residents, businesses, but also on external grants. And that is where the bulk of the money is going to come from, I think, particularly on this project. We actually didn't need to apply for external funding for the play area. I think on this project, just with the current economic climate, I suspect we probably will be relying on that. And certainly to get us to that point, as I say, we need to have full planning permission in place. We cannot proceed with an application until we have that. So let me just check I've covered everything else. Yeah, really just to say that we hope that we have your full support on the project as a whole, but also on final design. An enormous amount of time, energy and effort on both Parks part, but also on council offices. We have an established and good working group. We do believe we can deliver the project, and we really hope that you will help us to get this over the finish line. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have anything more you like to say or to ask at this point? Or shall we move towards a vote? If we look at the recommendation on page 196, excuse me, we're asked to decide initially that the Stoke Park redevelopment remains a priority capital project for delivery of selected energy funds. Approve the final design set out in Appendix A. Approve the planning drawings as set out in Appendix B. And with the timescale set out. And agree to receive an update at Council in November 2023 on the progress of planning submissions and fundraising. So can I ask, do you vote in favour of that? Could I ask for a show of hands? Thank you. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Well, thank you. Everyone who's come just with a skate park, you're welcome to go now.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now go back to the beginning of the agenda, I'm afraid, everyone. And we're going to be
Isolation in use. On board one.
So I now invite council to agree that the minutes of the council meeting held on 23rd of January this year, the extraordinary council meeting held on 13th of March this year, and the annual council meeting held on 11th of May can all be accepted and signed for the correct record. Everyone happy with that? Yes, thank you. I will later sign those minutes. We now move to minutes of committees and working parties reporting to the council, starting with the Community Services Committee. So I invite council to note the minutes of the Community Services Committee held on 18th of January this year and 15th of March this year. There is one recommendation from the meeting on 18th of January that was taken to council on 23rd of January. And I note these as received. These minutes are normally presented by the chair of the committee, but as these are from prior to the election, we're handling it in this way. Next is the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee. So again, the minutes of the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 8th of March are to be noted. Thank you. Now, I would normally invite Councillor Liver to present to Council the minutes of the Planning Committee meetings, but she's actually absent. So We have the dates in front of us and we're noting these as received. Well, we now move to officers' reports and the forward planner and resolution tracker. So can I ask the town clerk to introduce the item? This is 8.1.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is a standing item on council agendas, as it's a standing item also on committee meetings. This just sets out the known items that are going to come forward to council this year and also provides an update against every resolution that's previously been agreed by council. The idea here is that we report back the progress on every resolution. Madam Mayor, where they are considered to be complete, we ask council to approve that they're removed from resolution tracker. So very happy to take any questions on that.
Are there any questions on that, or have you all been happy with what you've seen? No questions? No questions, Councillor. Thank you. So we now move to the year-end account, 22-23, and I would like the finance manager, please, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to confirm that the provisional outturn has been noted by both CPF and CFC, and the year-end accounts that you've got in front of you have already been noted by CPF. Also, a recommendation made by CPF for an additional note to be added on, you can see on page 48, regarding the short-term investments have been added to the statement of accounts. For the financial year 2022-23, we're in a very strong financial position with 17,000 being added to our general reserves, which gives us just over 5 months of our net revenue expenditure budget. I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, councillors? Or are you happy to accept these as received? Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, there are some formal resolutions that need to be made in relation to this item on page 30.
Oh, yes. The recommendations here.
That's correct, Madam.
Yeah. So the recommendations on page 30, we're asked to note the outturn, as we have done, as set out in section 4, approve the level of earmarked reserves and general reserves at the 31st of March 2022, as set out in paragraph 5.8. Approve the statement of accounts for the financial year 22-23 and approve that the statement of accounts be signed by the Mayor and the responsible finance officer. Is everyone content that we should approve it? Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you. Now move to the internal audit report 22-23. And again, I would like the finance manager, please. Thank you very much.
So again, this report has been reviewed by CPF when we met on the 14th of June. I'm really pleased to say that we received substantial assurance from our internal auditors with no recommendations received. Hopefully that gives councillors reassurance that all of the numbers in the year-end accounts are correct and everything's with no recommendations. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions on internal audit? No, thank you. Well, we're asked to review and approve the internal audit report. Is everyone content to approve it? Thank you. Vote again. It's unanimous. Thank you. Again, the finance manager, I asked to introduce the annual governance statement 22-23. 8.4.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there's not much for me to really add on this item. It's more of it's a government process for you to approve section 1 of the AGAR, which needs to be formally approved before we can move on to the next item, which is the accountability return. But have to take any questions.
Well, it seems to be a formality, but an important one. So we're asked to improve section 1 as set out on page 65 of our agenda in point 2.11. And then approve that the annual government statement be signed by the mayor and the town clerk and submitted for audit. Is everyone content we do that? Yes, thank you. And again. Well, we now move to annual governance and accountability return, 8.5.
Again, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
So this is the final piece of the year-end puzzle for tonight. So once everything's agreed and signed, I can then send everything off to our external auditors, for them to review everything, and then you should receive a further report in November, just to from the external auditors to confirm that everything's all okay. But had to take any questions.
Just to so that you have some questions. On page 76, I think there's an error in one of the numbers. Point 2, 31st of March 2022. There's one, well.
Oh, apologies, yeah, in the precept.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what it
I read every bit of it.
Thank you.
Any other points or questions? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, so next time, not nearly as impressive as Councillor Boswell's text, but just on pages 73 and 75, and maybe I've misread the table, but we have a couple of no's. So on 73, there's something regarding trust funds, and on 75, there's something around the exercise of electors' rights. Could you just explain the implications of a no result on those two items, please? Yes, of course, Madam Mayor. So on page 73, the no there, it's not applicable for us, so that's why it's a no there. And on page 75, the no there was a debate I had with audit last year, where I have to give a period of time for the members of the public to review our accounts. It has to be open for 30 days as a statutory time. The date of the notice can't be the date of the first day of the period of the 30 days. So you have to put the notice up and then the 30 days start the following day. When I've put the notice up, it was the same day, so auditors felt it was only open for 29 days, not 30. But just to clarify, there was no questions before that period, during that period, or after that period about the accounts.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, and just to add on that, this is one of those items where I think, and alluded to it, but there was some debate that we had with those that flagged this to us, and ultimately we may not necessarily 100% agree with the position they took. However, they're the auditors, so we have to complete the form in a way that is in line with what they're telling us. But Dan gave a really good explanation of that. But sometimes we aren't always in agreement 100%, Madam Mayor, with what they tell them to go with the flow, so to speak.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. So we now move to review of the standing orders.
Yes, so Madam Mayor, so
Standing orders and financial regulations. So I can't, or have I missed that?
yeah, it's a form on page 61.
Oh, sorry.
Recommendation.
The series of recommendations on page 59. Yes, I jumped too far ahead. So it's recommended that we approve section 2 of the annual governance and accountability return 22-23, setting out the accounting statement for the financial year ended 31st of March 2023, approve that the annual statement 22-23 be signed by the mayor and the responsible finance officer and submitted for audit, and note that the annual internal audit report 22-23 section has been completed. Thank you very much. Oh, everyone happy with that? Thank you. None against. Thank you. So, Councillor, we now move to the review of the standing orders and financial regulations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report you have in front of you usually comes to council in this June cycle. Under our own standing orders and financial regulations, we have to review them every 12 months. So this is the review that we've undertaken for this year. You'll note that there are no recommended changes to the standing orders at this time from officers, and there are some what we would describe as minor changes to the financial regulations. Nothing significant in terms of the way in which we manage our finances, more language changes and changes to references within the regulations themselves. There's nothing substantial within them, Madam Mayor. However, we would ask that they are approved, but of course welcome any questions in advance of those.
Any questions from anyone? No, everyone's happy. Well, can I ask that we take a vote on whether we approve the revised financial regulations set out in Appendix A? Note there are no proposed changes to the standing orders set out in Appendix B. So could I have a vote, please? Show of hands. Thank you. Vote again. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
About that document. If in theory we wanted to amend it at any point because we didn't feel it reflected what we either wanted to achieve or because of the times, how easy would it be to amend? Within a year, say?
Yeah, so essentially the council can request the review of that at any time.
Will it be delegated to the CPF to do it? If they request to review it? Will the duty be delegated to this committee to do it?
Ordinarily, Madam Mayor, with those two, so standing orders, no. So ordinarily they would always come through to council because it's a council-wide issue and not a matter for CPF specifically. Financial regulations, yes, there could be an argument to delegate an initial view of CPF. CPF wouldn't make any change, wouldn't be able to make any changes, but they could make recommendations through to council.
Thank you. Well, we've taken a bit on that actually, so we're moving on to the next item, which is civility and respect pledge and councillor code of conduct.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report has two parts, as you've set out, Madam Mayor. The first is the civility and respect pledge, and this relates to a piece of work that started a number of years ago across the local government sector, but was really driven in particular around town and parish councils. It related to a number of issues that were apparent at that time around bullying, harassment and intimidation of both councillors and officers across the sector. So the workforce was set up to review this, and off the back of it, there was a number of different recommendations and things I looked at, one of which was the pledge. So the pledge the council hasn't signed up to previously, it's not been put in front of the council. It seemed a good time post-election to bring the pledge to us to ask the council to commit to that pledge. The points within that pledge are things I believe the council already operates within in any case. But we would join the somewhat 1,240 other councils that are already made that pledge. The second part is the statutory side of the report, and that is that every local authority or local council, in our case, has to have a council code of conduct. The current code of conduct that we have dates back to around 2013, and it hasn't been changed since that period or in that period. And the recommendation this evening is to consider the Local Government Association model code of conduct, which adopts the similar principles to the previous one. It does go into much greater detail on some of those particular points within. It's worth saying, Madam Mayor, that the code of conduct sets out how councillors have to operate, but also it does offer councillors protection. One of the key things with the code of conduct is that it protects councillors going about their business.
Thank you. Well, I don't know how much detail people have read all this paperwork, but I think it's reasonable for us still to vote on it. But I think that at the same time, I think I would ask everybody to look in some detail at the councillor code of conduct. Councillor Ellis.
I just got a couple of small points on this. At the top of page 145, it refers to industrial and provident society. Those no longer exist. They were renamed as cooperative or community benefit societies by that act in 2014.
Page 145.
Yeah. At the top, it says director.
Oh. Sorry, do you understand the point he's made?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I mean, all I would say is Councillor Ellis has made an observation of a failing of the local government association's model code of conduct. So well done.
Yeah.
In approving this evening, if you wish to, we'd be doing so, noting the comment that's been made that's been changed. We don't need to formally change anything.
Okay, second point, I chair the standards committee at the district council, and we adopted this, the model code of conduct, quite recently. And I think the report we got in here is in fact better than the one that we got at district, just for information.
Thank you. I'm sure Councillor's delighted to hear that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Always happy with that sort of feedback.
Thank you.
I had a quick question, which I should possibly councillor help with, which of the 1,240, do they all tend to just take it on board as is? Which I read it, I thought it was okay, or do they tend to spoke pieces to it? So is it actually something that people tend to put this in or not?
Not usually, no. Because it's considered to be best practice. And there's always been an extensive consultation with local authorities before they put this together.
And all I would add, Madam Mayor, is that when this LGA model was first released, there was a bit of a slow uptake across local authorities, principal authorities like districts, counties, unitaries, and town and parishes. So the civility and respect workforce got hold of it and adapted it, in particular the guidance, to reflect town and parish councils. So whilst they haven't made any changes to the model wording itself, I think what's been really impressive from my point of view, the work that they've done is in the guidance notes. Quite often the guidance notes don't really be explicit in answering the questions you want them to. So I think that has really been adapted to fit our sector, and for that we're recommending it as is, because we feel like it fits what we need.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Chair.
Sorry, I would like to clarify at the same time, bring awareness that in 139 in 10.2, is that if we receive a gift that over £50, then we have to register? Want to clarify that point?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that seems appropriate. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So £50 seems a bit low
in the context of as a councillor.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Yeah.
As a councillor, you seem to really expect to receive.
So in a commercial context, if you got something related to the councils?
No. Only in your role as a councillor would you receive a gift, for example, from a resident trying to get you to vote in a particular way.
Also, if it's nothing related or to my best knowledge about the council affair, you don't have to worry about it, right?
Well, it should be less than £50. Yes, if it's more than £50, you have to declare it.
Is that each time? So each time something?
Yes, I guess.
So it's not cumulative over and
Well, I don't think many councillors are receiving gifts.
Well, one example that comes up fairly frequently is some people get invitations to the pantomime.
I frequently get goods given to me.
But not as a councillor.
No, not as a councillor.
That's all, no, only as a councillor.
Yeah. I'm just aware that the person probably wasn't a councillor.
Are they asking you to do anything?
No, I
Well,
can tell them to move one of his vans.
Yes, I mean, any comment, councillor, on this?
No, Madam Mayor, just to clarify that this does relate to you acting as a town councillor. However, I would say to councillors to be cautious now, particularly councillors who haven't been councillors before, of these kind of things. This isn't an uncommon thing within a code of conduct, and the way in which things work, people may wish to give you gifts at certain times in the hope to influence you to do certain ways. So the limit used to be £25 up until fairly recently. So it's one of those things that it is to be very cautious of in any case as a town council.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? It's quite an important document, really, the code of conduct. So I think we all need to make sure we're quite well familiar with it. Nonetheless, I'm going to ask for a vote. I think that's can I ask for a vote on the code of conduct? Everyone in favour of adopting it? Thank you. Those against? That's unanimous. And the pledge. And to adopt a code of conduct, class disability and respect pledge. So just another show of hands on the pledge, please. Thank you. Those against? None against. Thank you. Well, we've covered the skate park project and the park pavilion, so we're moving now to the business plan update. And so I'll pass to the town clerk, please, to discuss the report and we will then discuss and consider the recommendations forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the report you have in front of you is a periodic report that we bring to council that sets out the progress against our business plan priorities. It's fair to say that as the council and the committee meet and the new council beds in, you will find out more about this information anyway, and some of the things that will be on the business plan update you will be aware of through particular committees. However, it's a useful opportunity at this meeting for us to give some high level points as to the progress against the business plan. I'm not proposing to go through each of these items, but I'm very happy to take any questions or any points of clarity that councillors may have.
Any questions on the business plan or points that people would like to make? It's quite a bit of detail there, and it's very good work. Oh, Councillor,
It's a bit detailed, and obviously when you have detail, you do unfortunately get some questions. One point that has been raised by one of the members of Harpenden, I'm sure you've been emailed about this as well, are the ponds and the very few ducks that we have on our pond. Apparently we had an infestation of rats that ate all the baby ducklings' eggs, and so that's why we don't have any ducks. So this might be a terrible rumour going around Harpenden, we don't have rats at all, but have we had the Pied Piper, or do we know about it, or are we going to improve our duck population? I thought part of the business plan, because obviously cutting down weeds and things are all about trying to maintain a good standard and a green flag for the common ponds.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So to answer two parts to the answer to this question, and one of them is to do with rats. I can only be completely open and honest in that response, which I'll come on to, drum roll. So from an environmental and biodiversity point of view, the ponds are brilliant for ducks and all sorts of species. So we couldn't do anything more that would encourage more of them. I'm not too sure about the rumour around what happened to the ducklings. Quite possible that may have happened. The story in terms of the rats, Madam Mayor, is that as with many towns across the country, during lockdown, with lots of businesses in town centres hospitality businesses closing, the rats that would ordinarily be around urban areas move to other areas like ponds and green spaces to find food. So the increase in rats we had down at Southdown Ponds was part of a national trend as a result of urban restaurants and bars not opening.
And maybe it will change.
Yeah, I mean, Madam Mayor, since things have opened up again, the infestation, to use that term, there was a lot less rats. But the other point to make is you would absolutely expect rats to be around Southdown Ponds anyway. It's their natural habitat. We did do some stuff after lockdown around duck feed. We used to sell duck food, but of course, the more food you were putting down may encourage rats to come. So we did some measures that we thought appropriate. We put some comms out to the public to try to get them to stop. But the reality of the situation is they were there because of the lockdown and the impact on the urban areas, as I say, similar to lots of towns, which is a bit of a gruesome message to give, but that's the honest reason as to why there was an increase.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, just as we get into the sort of business planning cycle, and it seems to me we had a very good business plan before. I'd just like to restate my thanks to the councillors who served on the previous administration for that. Looking forward, I think possibly all 16 of us plus the officers would like to in 4 years' time be able to look back and show how we've all together as a council made a continued positive impact on our community. So I'm just wondering what our sort of planning process is in terms of having that discussion. So I think there are some things that are worth discussing in no particular order. The high streets, which I think is subject to persistent pressure in terms of high rents, footfall, the banks. We know we have some issues with closure of banks, persistent questions about parking, whether or not we should look again at pedestrianising the service road on the high street and so on. I think these are sort of quite fundamental issues, and I know there's a lot of opinion in the community on this. So I'm just curious to understand what is our opportunity as a council and as a team of 16 people plus the officers to have that sort of broader discussion about Harpenden and the sort of policy decisions we want to build into our business plan.
Well, I think, can I just say this, as we are a Lib Dem run council for now, for the next 4 years, assuming that there are no by-elections, it would be up to the Lib Dem group, I think, initially to have a session and then to move to the wider group with officers. That's my feeling, Town Clerk.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Yeah, there's different ways in which that can happen. That is one way, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to respond to that, I don't disagree with that, but I think one of the strengths of this council, if I may, has been the level of consultation that it undertakes with the community. And I think time and again, and these documents have been presented tonight on our websites, we've done a very good job as a council going out on consultation on various topics, and the responses from the community and businesses have been excellent. And the quality of engagement for our community is something that we shouldn't take for granted. So I think some of these questions, yes, party political, but I think they should also be subject to extensive consultation as well.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor, can you comment on that?
No, Madam Mayor, no, nothing to add on that.
Councillor Ray.
I had a question on 12, 13 and 14, which was mainly dealing with transportation and parking. And just that there were no actions planned and comments. And what was being thought around that, and whether or not parking is still an issue in Boston, I suspect for everyone.
But I would say, sorry, parking is not, it's only Lydica Park. Do we have any control over? It's a district council.
Although we do.
I argue with the district council regularly, being one of the few conservatives in the district council. Their administration of the parking leaves a lot to be desired. We haven't had a traffic warden down here for 3 months.
But we still do have our car. So
we only have Lydica.
Yeah, so we're not completely avoid from, it seems to me, well, it felt to me that that was still something which we did have some influence over and still some interaction with.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so there's a few different sort of things to say in response to this. So firstly, clearly we have assets that impact upon parking and transport and movement of people. And at various points throughout the year, there'll be decisions that committees and councils will take that are part of this wider agenda. It's probably useful to set some of the context to what's referred to as the parking strategy in the business plan, what actually quickly evolved into the transport and movement strategy. So at the point at which developing this business plan that we've got here, prior to COVID-19, was that the town council was going to play a lead role in facilitating other partners to come around the table, as it often does, to deal with a much wider issue about the transport and movement of people. Yes, quite correct that the district council are responsible for parking, but actually lots of different partners, including Herts Highways, who impact on the problem.
And I think the district's only street parking as well. There's the station with its car park, Waitrose within its car park, Sainsbury's. There's a number of parties.
Yeah, so the town council produced the draft transport and movement strategy. Transport and movement deliberately being the title because that's the theme of our Harpenden neighbourhood plan. And we were due to hold I'm just trying to remember the exact date, but we were basically due to hold a public meeting a week before COVID-19 and lockdowns hit. So we were going out to consultation on that strategy, which had a number of different actions. And if it's useful, I can share that strategy that was drafted. Had a number of different actions, both in terms of the things that the town council directly control, but also the things that we might want to influence our other partners to do. We had COVID, and clearly it was paused during that time because, you know, everything else going on. We came out of COVID and it wasn't deemed appropriate at that time from the council to pick it up again because we wanted to see whether there was much lag in terms of whether behaviours had changed. So had the parking issues before COVID, it's still been the same. And that's the point where we've got to. It's not been picked up again. So there isn't any planned work to look at that in this year, but that does still sit there.
So I would like to say that I think we should be looking at that again and thinking whether there is anything that we as a town council can do with other parties, accepting that we probably are bringing people together rather than doing something like that.
So, Madam Mayor, if council wish to do that, that would sound a sensible thing to do. And what you could resolve under this item now is that we add an item to the forward plan for September, where we bring what was the draft transport and movement strategy to council for consideration and to see where you wanted to go next with that.
Yes, thank you. Well,
Yes, point of information, Sainsbury's car park belongs to the district council.
Okay.
It's not Sainsbury's.
Yeah, but there's still a number of assets. Well, Waitrose has a car park, that's not owned by the district council, is it? That's
belongs to
Waitrose.
I think
Train station.
The train station as well, there's another. It's all part of the parking strategy for the Harpenden, isn't
We
it?
have no influence.
limited.
We tried to stop the increase in the parking charges. The district told us to get lost.
Any other comments or questions from councillors? No? Oh, councillor Fisher.
Wanted to raise an issue about item 22, which is page 287. It's to deliver an effective planning function to consider local applications and implement the policies of the Harpenden neighbourhood. And as we know, the district council, I'm sure the county council will be part and parcel of looking at the local plan and trying to get the local plan away and ultimately enforce. And I think as a district council, we should all be ad idem, but we should be protecting the Harpenden neighbourhood plan, which in turn forms part of the development plan, and to make sure that any local plan that's brought in, whether with a view to amending it in due course or not, should not be inconsistent with the Harpenden neighbourhood plan. It would seem So, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, that's the wrong way round. There's a hierarchy of plans.
Yes,
The Harpenden neighbourhood plan can't be inconsistent with the local plan, not the other way around.
but we have a neighbourhood plan, don't we, that's in force?
Yes.
So if the local plan is put into force and we feel as a town council that it undermines the work that was done and the plan that was voted for by the people of Harpenden, I feel that we should fight quite strongly for that not to be forced through, so that it's to the detriment of the people of Harpenden, and particularly areas of Greenbelt that have been shown in various reports to be unsafe or unsuitable for development.
I think the town clerk has something to say here.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to clarify a bit on the process in terms of the local plan. So clearly the local plan needs to go out to community engagement, and there's various regulations, 18, 19, that has to be undertaken. At that point, I would expect, as it has done previously, the town council to have a view on the local plan, and as a consultee, take the opportunity to submit its comments on the local plan. So that would give the council the opportunity to challenge areas that they may feel is not in line with the neighbourhood plan, which is a community document as voted through referendum. So there's a bit of process there that gives us the opportunity. Of course, Councillor Ellis is also correct in that ultimately the neighbourhood plan has to conform with the local plan. So if the local plan was to be developed and it would mean that the neighbourhood plan was no longer conforming, we as a town council would have to revisit the neighbourhood plan and bring it back in line. Now, we have been a bit concerned about this for a while. However, having seen the local plan and having spoken to district officers at the end of last week, there isn't a requirement, as I've seen so far, that we will have to change anything in the neighbourhood plan. So we will still be in conformity, which is good news. Having said that, what you have to do with a neighbourhood plan every 5 years, you have to carry out a review. So we are due this year, so this mayoral year, to carry out a review of the neighbourhood plan. Now, there's two ways we could do that. We could do a major review. So a major review would be changing any policy. If you would change the intent of any policy, or clarify the intent of any policy, that would be classed as a major review. And in essence, we would have to then go back right to the start of the process for producing a neighbourhood plan. Nationally, the way it's done, it's not good, but that's what we'd have to do. We can also do a minor review, which means we don't touch any of the policies for now, but we might change some of the narrative or clarify some of the narrative sections around the policies. So the recommendation that will come forward at the appropriate time this year would be that the town council carries out a minor review in light of the fact that the local plan won't have been agreed at that point, because there is little value in the town council changing the neighbourhood plan whilst the local plan isn't agreed. If the local plan is then agreed down the line in 2 years' time or whatever it might be, town council then may wish to consider whether it wants to carry out a major review of the neighbourhood plan to reflect or to challenge or to add detail to some of the local plan elements. That's a bit about the process of how we could give our views on the draft, but also what we may have to do in terms of our own neighbourhood plan to make it relevant.
Thank you. The heritage.
Sorry, if I can just add one little bit to what Carl said. This, I mean, I presume Councillor Fish was referring to various planning applications that either get sent through or there are problems with or get delayed. The problem at the moment in planning is that we've got a committee of 17 people, of which 11 sit every 3 weeks. There is only Councillor Gaskell and myself who are Harpenden, who I sit on it as often as I can.
Councillor Canning as well.
Oh, Councillor Canning. But we're the only people who have a Harpenden view. The other 8 members are all St Albans. It is very difficult to get a view of Harpenden across to St Albans councillors. I'm the most senior councillor on this planning committee. I sat on it for 12 years. I sat on it when it was the north, and it only covered Wheathampstead, Harpenden and Redbourne. We were then local councillors with a view. At the moment, I do feel that I'm banging my head against a brick wall on many occasions. I'm the only Conservative on this committee. I will fight for Harpenden all the way, as I've done for 12 years. But I'm outnumbered.
Thank you. Yes, councillor Scott.
So, councillor Heritage, I think your points are well made. I guess an observation would be that Harpenden being one part of a larger district would be true of any part of the district, and not just Harpenden. So I don't think that's necessarily we're a unique.
We have the most controversial applications.
Possibly and arguably, although possibly I'm sure if there are other people who would in other parts of the district who would have equally strong and passionate views. But I think yeah, I think that's the only point I had to make. Thank you very much.
Councillor Fisher.
The only point I'd make was, well, two actually, sorry. So thank you for fighting for Harpenden. I think it's really important, both of you, to make sure that the residents' views are heard, particularly on contentious greenbelt planning applications. I think if you're not heard on the council, it would be a great pity, and I don't think it's anything to do with which party you represent.
Well, no,
ultimately, it comes down to the will of Harpenden and what applications are sensible and necessary to meet what one might perceive as arbitrary targets.
I'm a lone voice. What you must understand, yes, you said I don't bring politics into it, but I've one voice. Don't get much support from the other side.
Thank you. Any other points about the business plan? No? Well, yeah. Well, I think we vote through.
I was just going to say, Madam Mayor, did you wish to consider amending the forward plan to bring the transport and movement strategy to council in September? That would just be something we'd ask council to resolve to do if you wish to, and then you'd just be noting the rest of the business plan.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah. What do people think about that? Would you vote in favour of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll do that. Thank you. Well, we're now moving to exempt business. And so the confidential nature of the following items, which relate to the business matters of other individuals and organisations, the public should be excluded, I'm afraid. So could I ask the public, such as they are left here?
Do you want a quick word with me before you go?
Yeah. Old fashioned, I like to.
So Madam Mayor, just to keep you on track with business, in order to move to exempt business, you need to ask councillors to resolve to accept that we move to exempt business.
Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry. Well, do you agree that we move to exempt business? Yes. Yeah. But we move to exempt business.